What makes certain messages penetrate the male mind like burning arrows, while others bounce off like stones against armor? Picture this scenario. A woman sends a simple text to her partner, 3 words. Yet this man, who seemed indifferent to everything, suddenly transforms. His breathing shifts, his eyes brighten, his attention becomes completely captivated. What happened? According to Sigmund Freud, there exist hidden codes that speak directly to the male unconscious. Messages that bypass rationality and reach that primitive, instinctual part that every man carries within himself. This isn't about manipulation, but about deep understanding of the mechanisms that govern the human psyche. Today we'll discover together 6 types of communication that, according to Freudian psychoanalysis, possess an irresistible magnetic power over the male mind. The first signal we'll explore touches something that strikes the deepest core of every man's identity, his unconscious need to feel essential. If you want to continue exploring the secrets of human behavior, subscribe to the channel. Let's begin. The first type of message no man can ignore is the one that awakens his ancestral protective instinct. This isn't about feigning weakness, but about communicating an authentic need that touches the deepest strings of his psyche. Imagine this situation. A woman writes to her partner, "I need you," followed by a specific explanation of a situation that puts her in difficulty. It's not a whim, it's not manipulation. It's the genuine expression of a moment when his presence becomes fundamental. Freud identified in men a psychic structure he defined as mastery instinct, the unconscious need to feel competent and necessary. This impulse has roots in the ideal ego, that part of personality that aspires to be strong, capable, indispensable. When a woman communicates a real need, without excessive drama, but with sincerity, she touches directly this identity core. The male unconscious interprets this message as an opportunity to express his protective function, a role that modern society often denies or diminishes. It's as if suddenly he felt called to be the best version of himself. This isn't about superiority or power dynamics, but about a deep psychological need to feel useful and worthy. The key lies in specificity and authenticity. "I need you to move this furniture" is different from generic "I need you." The first activates the protective instinct in a healthy and constructive way. The second can generate anxiety or confusion. Freud emphasized how the unconscious responds better to concrete and defined stimuli rather than vague requests that can activate defense mechanisms. This type of communication works because it simultaneously satisfies 2 fundamental Freudian needs: the need to feel necessary, reality principle applied to identity, and the need to confirm one's competence, sublimation of the mastery instinct. When these 2 elements align, the response is almost automatic. But attention, authenticity is crucial. The male unconscious has developed through millennia of evolution a surprising capacity to recognize manipulation. If the need isn't genuine, if it's used as a control instrument, defense mechanisms activate immediately, creating the opposite effect. The power of this message lies in its ability to make the man feel like the hero of his daily story. Freud spoke of healthy narcissism, the legitimate need to feel one's value confirmed by people we love. When a woman recognizes and honors this need, she creates a direct bridge to her partner's unconscious. Have you ever noticed how men literally change energy when they feel truly needed? It's psychoanalysis in action, the ego aligning with the ideal ego, creating a sensation of completeness and purpose that is deeply fulfilling. In the next chapter, we'll discover the second type of message, one that touches another fundamental chord of the male psyche, recognition of his unique competencies. The second irresistible message speaks directly to the male need to see his specific competencies recognized. It's a message that sounds like, "Nobody understands this subject like you," or "Your opinion on this matter is what interests me most." Imagine a woman who, instead of searching Google or asking anyone else, turns specifically to her partner for advice in an area where he excels. It doesn't matter if it's technology, sports, cooking, or any other field. What matters is the explicit recognition of his expertise. From a Freudian perspective, this type of communication activates what the psychoanalyst defined as healthy, narcissistic libido. Men have a profound need to feel that their competencies are not only recognized, but also sought after and valued. It's a form of validation that goes straight to the heart of the ideal ego, that psychic structure representing what we aspire to be. Freud observed how male identity often builds around specific competencies, a sort of specialization that becomes an integral part of the sense of self. When this competency is recognized by someone who matters, it activates a deep gratification circuit that completely bypasses rational resistance. The difference between this message and a simple compliment lies in specificity and practical utility. It's not "you're good," but "you're the right person to help me with this specific problem." This distinction is fundamental because it touches the Freudian reality principle. The man feels valued for something concrete and usable, not for vague, generic affirmations. The male unconscious interprets this recognition as confirmation of his identity and value in the world. It's as if the woman was saying, "In this specific area, you are irreplaceable to me." This message simultaneously satisfies the need for uniqueness and the need for utility, two fundamental pillars of male self-esteem according to Freudian theory. But there's an even deeper element. Freud spoke of libidinal investment of the object. When someone we emotionally invest in recognizes our value, it creates a positive reinforcement cycle that cements the bond. The man not only feels valued, but also develops a stronger attachment toward whoever values him. The effectiveness of this approach also lies in its non-competitive aspect. Instead of comparing his competencies with others, the message establishes a category of its own. "You are my expert in this field." This eliminates performance anxiety and instead activates the pleasure of sharing one's knowledge. It's important to note that this mechanism only works if the recognition is authentic. The male unconscious has developed very refined sensors for sincerity, probably as an evolutionary survival mechanism. If the recognition is false or instrumental, psychic defenses activate immediately. Have you ever observed how men transform when they talk about something they feel truly competent in? Their eyes light up, posture changes, voice becomes more confident. It's the ideal ego manifesting in all its power. But there exists a third type of message, even more powerful, that touches a more intimate and vulnerable dimension of the male psyche. The third irresistible message is the one that gives men permission to be vulnerable without losing their identity. It sounds like, "I like when you show me what you really feel," or "Your sensitivity makes me feel closer to you." Imagine this scene. A man has had a difficult day at work. Normally, he would close himself off, answer "everything's fine," and proceed as if nothing happened. But if his partner tells him, "I see something touched you today, and I'd like to understand what," something profound activates in his psyche. Freud identified in emotional repression one of the most common defense mechanisms in adult men. Society, education, cultural expectations push men to develop what the psychoanalyst called rigid superego in relation to emotional expression. Men don't cry. Be strong. Don't show weakness. These messages create a psychic armor that separates men from their authentic emotions. But under this armor, the unconscious yearns to be seen and understood in its completeness. When a woman communicates that male vulnerability is not only acceptable, but desirable and attractive, she touches a primordial wound that every man carries within: the fear of being rejected if he shows himself for what he really is. The power of this message lies in its liberating effect. Freud spoke of catharsis, the psychological relief felt when repressed content is brought to consciousness and accepted. For many men, the opportunity to express their emotions without being judged represents a form of daily therapy. The key lies in how the invitation is formulated. Not "why don't you ever talk about your feelings," which sounds like criticism and activates defenses, but "I feel more connected to you when you share what you feel," which sounds like a gift and invitation. The difference lies in focus. The first message underlines a lack, the second celebrates a presence. The male unconscious responds to this type of communication because it resolves a fundamental internal contradiction, the conflict between the need to be authentic and the fear of being rejected for one's authenticity. When this conflict resolves, enormous emotional energy is released that transforms into intimacy, connection, and deep attachment. Freud observed how the capacity to be vulnerable in a safe way is one of the prerequisites for mature love. When a man finds a safe space for his emotionality, he not only feels relieved, but also develops profound gratitude toward whoever offered him this space. It's as if that person became a safe harbor for his soul. But attention, this message only works if followed by genuine welcome. If the woman invites vulnerability and then judges, criticizes, or uses received information against the man in moments of conflict, it creates trauma that can close that door forever. The male unconscious has an elephantine memory when it comes to emotional betrayals. The result of such communication is extraordinary. The man not only opens up, but begins actively seeking that emotional connection. It's as if he suddenly discovered a part of himself he had forgotten he had. Have you ever noticed how a man's energy changes when he feels truly seen and accepted in his emotional entirety? It's a transformation that touches the heart of Freudian theory on psychic healing through acceptance. But there exists a fourth type of message that touches an even more primitive and powerful dimension of the male psyche. The fourth, irresistible message is one that presents a challenge in a way that stimulates the conquest instinct without creating conflict. It sounds like, "I bet you can't," followed by something specific and achievable, or "It would be incredible if you could." Imagine a woman telling her partner, "I bet you can't make me smile in less than 5 minutes," or "It would be fantastic if you could prepare that recipe you always talked about." It's not criticism, it's not pressure, but a playful challenge that immediately activates something primitive and powerful in the male psyche. Freud identified in the human psyche what he called mastery instinct, the deep need to dominate the environment, overcome difficulties, demonstrate one's competence. In men, this instinct is often amplified by millennia of evolution and social conditioning. But in modern life, few things offer the opportunity to activate this instinct in a healthy and constructive way. When a woman presents a challenge in this way, she touches directly the motivational center of the male unconscious. It's not aggressive competition, but what Freud would have defined as sublimation, the transformation of a primitive impulse into something socially acceptable and personally gratifying. The power of this approach lies in its psychological structure. First, it presents a clear and achievable goal. Second, it implies confidence in the man's abilities. Third, it promises emotional reward, the pleasure of having won the challenge. These three elements together create what modern neuroscientists would call a dopamine cocktail, but which Freud described as activation of libido in the ego. The genius aspect of this message is that it transforms the man from passive to active. Instead of receiving requests or criticisms, he finds himself facing an opportunity to shine, to demonstrate his value through action. It's the difference between "you should do more often" and "I bet you'd be capable of." The first activates defense mechanisms. The second activates growth mechanisms. Freud observed how male identity often forms through overcoming tests and challenges. When a woman recognizes this need and honors it by creating positive opportunities for conquest, she's not manipulating the man, but working in harmony with his natural psychological structure. But there's an even more subtle and powerful element. This type of message communicates confidence in the man's abilities. From a psychoanalytic perspective, when someone we emotionally invest in expresses confidence in our abilities, it activates what Freud called positive identification. We begin to see ourselves through that person's eyes and aspire to confirm their confidence. Constructive challenge also creates a sense of collaboration rather than opposition. The man doesn't feel criticized or under pressure, but invited to participate in a game where both can win. This eliminates performance anxiety and replaces it with enthusiasm and motivation. It's fundamental that the challenge be calibrated, neither too easy, which would be condescending, nor too difficult, which would activate anxiety and avoidance mechanisms. The art lies in finding that sweet spot that stimulates without discouraging. Have you ever observed how men light up when they feel they have a clear goal to achieve? It's the Freudian mastery instinct in full action, a primitive and powerful energy that, when channeled correctly, can create wonders. But the fifth message touches an even deeper dimension, the need to leave a significant mark on the world. The fifth irresistible message touches what Freud identified as one of the deepest needs of the human psyche, the desire to leave a lasting mark, to build something that survives beyond our physical existence. This message sounds like, what you're building will have lasting impact, or people will remember you for this. Imagine a man who works hard, but often feels invisible, forgettable, as if his efforts were lost in the daily noise of life. Then his partner tells him, what you're doing will change our children's lives, or your work is building something important that will last over time. Suddenly, everything changes. His commitment acquires cosmic meaning. Freud spoke of the tension between eros, life instinct, and thanatos, death instinct, and observed how humans seek to resolve mortality anguish through creating lasting works. For many men, this need is particularly intense, perhaps due to evolutionary conditioning that pushed them to be builders and protectors of future generations. When a woman recognizes and names the lasting impact of a man's actions, she touches directly what Jung, Freud's student, called generative instinct, the deep need to contribute to something larger than oneself. This isn't about ego or vanity, but about an existential need to feel that one's life has meaning that transcends the present moment. The power of this message lies in its capacity to transform even the most quotidian actions into gestures of cosmic meaning. Freud observed how sublimation, the transformation of primordial instincts into socially constructive activities, was one of the most important mechanisms for psychological well-being. When a man feels that his work, his actions, his sacrifices are building something lasting, he automatically activates this sublimation mechanism. The deepest aspect of this message is that it responds to what Freud identified as existential anguish, the unconscious fear of insignificance, emptiness, forgetfulness. Every human being carries within the terrifying question, does my life really matter? When someone we love tells us yes, our life not only matters, but is contributing to building something important and lasting, what we could call a psychological miracle occurs. This type of recognition works because it connects to what Freud defined as ideal ego libido projected into the future. Ideal. The man feels valued not only for what he is today, but for the impact he'll have tomorrow, for the legacy he's creating. It's a form of validation that transcends the present and embraces symbolic eternity. The key lies in the specificity and authenticity of recognition. It's not enough to say you're important, but what you're teaching our son about perseverance will help him his whole life, or the way you treat people is changing the office atmosphere. ID. These specific messages touch the heart of male identity because they show concrete connections between present actions and future impacts. Freud noted how men who manage to see the lasting meaning of their actions tend to be more motivated, more resilient, more capable of overcoming temporary difficulties. It's as if recognition of their future impact energizes them in the present. Have you ever noticed how a man's energy changes when he feels part of something bigger, when he sees that his contribution will have impact beyond today? It's Freudian sublimation of death fear through creating symbolic immortality. But there exists a sixth and final message, perhaps the most powerful of all, that touches the very nucleus of male identity. The sixth and most powerful message is the one that communicates total acceptance, even facing imperfections, errors, the dark sides of male personality. It sounds like, even when you make mistakes, even when you're not perfect, my love for you doesn't change, or your imperfections make me love even more who you really are. Imagine a man who has made an error, who feels inadequate, who is confronted with his imperfect humanity. In these moments, his unconscious is dominated by what Freud called neurotic guilt, the terrifying fear of being abandoned because of one's shortcomings. Then he hears these words of unconditional acceptance. The effect is literally transformative. Freud identified in ambivalence the oscillation between love and hate toward oneself, one of the fundamental conflicts of the human psyche. Men, often raised with expectations of perfection and constant strength, develop what the psychoanalyst called punitive superego, a cruel internal voice that criticizes them for every error, every moment of weakness, every manifestation of humanity. When a woman communicates unconditional acceptance, she's not just offering forgiveness for a specific error. She's literally rewriting the man's internal script, replacing the critical voice of the superego with a loving and accepting voice. It's what Freud would have defined as a reparative love object, someone who heals psychic wounds through unconditional love. The power of this message lies in its capacity to break the shame cycle. Freud observed how shame is one of the most destructive emotions for the human psyche because it doesn't regard something we've done, guilt, but something we are, shame. When a man feels he's loved not despite his imperfections, but including his imperfections, shame loses its destructive power. This type of acceptance touches what Jung, who worked with Freud, called shadow integration, acceptance of aspects of ourselves we normally hide or refuse. For many men, this integration is particularly difficult because they've been socialized to show only strength, competence, control. Unconditional acceptance offers a safe space to be completely human, but there's an even deeper aspect. Freud theorized that mature love requires accepting ambivalence, the capacity to love someone completely, imperfections included. When a woman communicates this type of love, she's not only accepting the man, she's also modeling a form of love deeper and more mature than he might have ever experienced. The psychological effect is revolutionary. The man stops wasting psychic energy trying to hide his imperfections and can instead invest that energy in growth, intimacy, authentic connection. It's as if suddenly he could breathe completely for the first time. This message works because it resolves what Freud identified as the central conflict of relationships, the fear that if the other truly knew us completely, they couldn't love us. When this fear is dissolved through unconditional acceptance, it frees a capacity to love and be loved that goes beyond everything the man has ever experienced before. The art lies in communicating this acceptance at the right moments, not as concession or resignation, but as celebration of the other's complete humanity. It's the difference between "I accept you despite" and "I love you precisely because you're completely human." Have you ever observed the transformation that occurs in a man when he feels completely accepted for what he is? It's as if all his defense mechanisms melted, revealing the authentic person underneath. It's Freudian love in its purest form, total acceptance that heals and transforms. These are the 6 messages that, according to Freud, no man can resist. But the real question now is, how will you use them? Freud taught us that the human unconscious responds to deep truths, not superficial techniques. These messages work not because they manipulate, but because they recognize and honor the fundamental psychological needs that every man carries within himself. But now the most important question is for you. Which of these messages resonates most with your experience? Which do you think could transform your relationships? I ask you to leave a comment below, writing your city of origin and sharing which message struck you most. If this video gave you a new perspective on human relationships, hit like and subscribe to the channel to continue this journey in deep understanding of the human psyche. Share this video with someone who could benefit from these Freudian insights. Thank you for being part of this community that explores the mysteries of the human mind. Together, we're discovering the deepest secrets of how we really function. What city are you watching from? Drop a comment below and let me know which of these psychological insights resonated most with you.